I am not under any orders to make the world a better place. I just have a podcast. Reality Bites coming up next.
Haven't Seen It with Tim Sestito and Tommy Tevenet. Hello, everybody. Welcome on in. Thank you all so much for listening today. This is a podcast where one of us is watching a movie for the very first time. And today that is myself. This
Yeah.
is episode 99, Tommy. Very
Mhm.
exciting of the
Yeah. We're
podcast.
almost there.
So let me ask you a question here because you told me you had seen this movie before. How many times have you seen Reality Bites?
To be honest, I'm almost in a similar boat as you. I only saw this movie for the first time back in December. I rented it
Really?
from, yeah, I rented it from Best Video in Hamden. Shout out to them. Got the DVD because I was listening to the Lisa Loeb song, and I was like, "Yeah, I've never seen that movie. Why don't I see this movie?" And I saw it, and I liked it. I was like, "Shit, this is a good movie." I'm shocked I never saw
Because
this
I mean,
before.
this is like the epitome of Tommy Core, the movie. Like I just like I'm sitting there and I'm just like
Yeah.
I gotta
What is
start
this
third.
Tommy bullshit?
I gotta start thoroughly vetting our movie. Not that this is a bad movie,
Yeah.
just not necessarily my favorite.
Yeah.
But I was just like the soundtrack was so in Tommy. And if you're not aware, Tommy Core is like if you took the essence of Brooklyn, like the hipster,
Yeah.
and then you shredded it down and put it in Norwalk, Connecticut, that's Tommy. That's Tommy Core to a T. You know what I mean? Like it's not full blown hipster. It's readily
It's
accessible.
yeah.
It's like baby's first hipster, baby's
Yeah.
first step into being a hipster. That's Tommy Core. That's my definition.
Your interpretation of Tommy Core right there.
That's several of our friends' definitions of Tommy Core right there is
Yeah.
like is if you took Brooklyn and transplanted it to Norwalk, and then you're kind of stuck, and you don't get the full thing, but you get a good part of it
Yeah.
there.
Well, one of the reasons why we're covering this movie is that this movie is actually celebrating its 30th anniversary on February 18th. Going to be turned 30 years old. That's which is insane to think about. This is a film about people in their young 20s, and I think that both times I've watched this now just captures that spirit of your early 20s, just like hanging out with your friends a lot, especially in like the first act of this, like first, third, second act of just like hanging out. Like your friends are always right near you. And so like you're just doing shit like, quoting good times. Like I love that scene right there. It's a fun hangout movie.
Yeah, this is I we'll dive deeper into it. And granted, I had to multitask while I was watching this movie, if you catch my drift. So I didn't fully engross myself the way I would have loved to. But when I really like the ending of it, but we'll get into it. But Tommy, any movies you saw that you want to discuss on the podcast
Yeah,
today?
so I went to the theaters over the weekend. I saw the movie, the new Diablo Cody movie, Lisa Frankenstein. Diablo Cody who wrote Juno and Jennifer's Body came up with a new movie with Catherine Newton called Lisa Frankenstein about like a teen that pretty much somehow resurrects some old dead guy from like the 1800s and becomes his boyfriend. So it was a movie that was like essentially very Tim Burton-esque, very Heathers-esque, very Winona Ryder-esque, speaking of her. And yet it felt like a lot of those movies, like, Beetlejuice, which we've covered on the pod, and then like Ethan Heathers, but without a lot of like the charm or heart. It was overall, it was okay, but it felt like it could have just been so much better. It felt like, just the aesthetic, but not a ton deeper right there, unfortunately. And, Zelda Williams, Ron Williams' daughter, directed the movie, and it wasn't as great as I thought it would be.
That's all right. I mean, that's part of going to the movie is seeing if you
Yeah.
like it for yourself or not. Movie I saw in theaters this week was Anyone But You, the romantic comedy with Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell. I was cute. It was as like they made it as like 2023 meets 2005 a romantic comedy as you possibly could. One thing I do look for in kind of like your run-of-the-mill studio romantic comedy is like doesn't seem like the cast is having a good time, and it really felt like the cast was having a good time. Um, they play.
At a certain point, a lot of these rom coms just become like party montages, where it's just like, let's see Sydney Sweeney have a fun time.
Yeah, well, listen, I wouldn't say it was that. Like, it had its emotional beats. It was just like kind of a strange concept where like they hooked up once, then she left and then came back, overheard him like talking shit or whatever because his guard was up because his mom died, obviously. So his
Mhm.
guard's up anytime any betrayal there. And then turns out his best friend and her sister are getting married. They have the wedding in Australia. They're causing fights. So it's like everyone's plan to get them together and they smell it out and they start to play along, right? It's typical romantic comedy nonsense, but I enjoyed it. I had a good time at the theater. I will say I feel like one of the things that bugged me was the opening of the movie, where like the meet cute happens. It happens in the first 10 seconds of the movie, basically.
Yeah.
First 2 minutes, whatever, at a coffee shop. But we see Sydney Sweeney like walking to the coffee shop, but she's just like unceremoniously introduced into the camera. And
Like,
same
where's the
with
movie star moment?
and yeah, no, that's my point. And then Glenn Powell, same thing, like unceremoniously introduced into the camera. And like this movie's box office is $170 million. Like that did really well. And like
Yeah,
Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney are kind of like close to breaking the curse of like not like movie stars just not existing anymore. Like they've just been having killer post-pandemic years. Like Glenn Powell being in Top Gun Maverick, having a really memorable role in that. Sydney Sweeney was in
Euphoria.
Euphoria and the other HBO, The White Lotus. She was in the first season of that. Like their profiles are very big,
Mhm.
but like they were so unceremoniously introduced, and I like just wanted like to not see their face immediately and just give me like a cool reveal of the character, not
Well,
like
it is a thing that people say this over and over again that we don't have movie stars right now. I think Glenn Powell is just making his case right here. He did that Richard Linklater movie. The was it the
everybody
set?
wants them.
No. The Hitman or something like that. I
Oh,
forget
right,
what.
that's going to be on Netflix, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, yeah, it's going to Netflix for us. Like, he should be able to have his fucking mid-budget stuff. We don't see the both movies we just talked about, Lisa Frankenstein and But You are mid-budget comedies, which we need more of back
Yeah,
in.
we need more of.
All right.
I feel like these are the movies that like establish stars. Like you have these
Mhm.
smaller but mid-sized budget movies, like they look like they're funded by Hollywood, where and I would say something like Anyone But You, where the script's a little underwritten, in my opinion, but like kind of carried by two great stars, like two big star performances. And I felt like this was a good movie for them to have like the introductions where they're both like co-leading the movie. Like,
Mhm.
TV is going to be shot differently in like Sydney Sweeney's case. And then for like Glenn Powell, like he was, he was playing the Iceman role essentially in Maverick. So he didn't need like the movie star reveal where like Tom Cruise got that full treatment like when he's on that hangar bay in that movie.
Yeah, because
And
he
it like
deserves
pans
it.
through the past, like his past and stuff like that. But like Glenn Powell, I think he was just like playing pool and kind of being a dick. Like that's all we needed for his character in that movie. It was just something I wished I like that's what I was wishing. Like I just felt like, oh, like it'd be
A little
cool.
more cinematic.
Yeah, a little
Well,
more
it's because
cinematic. Like bring us back. Like just like don't show me their face at first. Like the whole thing was like she had to use the bathroom. She walks into the coffee shop. They tell her customer policy she had to buy something, or store policy you have to buy something. And then she pans over to the line, and he's just standing at the front of it. Like that's all we see. Like if she's gonna buy a cup of coffee, it's gonna take
you're like,
for
where's my
for
movie center
and
shot?
then he's like, oh, like oh honey, like why don't you get this? And what's the bathroom key? This comes with one, like meet cute moment, whatever. Um, where it's like, why couldn't like the camera have followed her down the stairs as she's like kind of shuffling along, like in a one sweeping shot, like this cinematic, like a very cinematic moment. And then like it pans to like the way back of the line, but we don't see him, and then the camera shifts perspectives and it like leans over and it's just the back of his head and like that, and then you get like a close zoom in her face and a close zoom in his face. Like it's all we need, you know what I mean? But just like a little
Mm.
cinematic tension of like who the actors that we know
Well,
whose faces are on the thing, like reveal them to me, like make me feel like they're like a movie star, like they
well,
have
so
power in
often,
this
so
film.
I feel like so often so many of those films like end up, they say nowadays that like directors are told like shoot this so it can be played on an iPhone too. That's why you don't get as many cinematic and get much more static shots again. I feel like it. But it's good to see rom coms back in theaters. I feel like movies like that aren't made as much like a movie like Reality Bites.
Yeah, a movie like Reality Bites, that's a good transition, Tommy, into today's feature, Reality Bites.
Winona Ryder, Ethan Hawke, Ben Stiller in a comedy about life,
Do you have a lawyer?
I don't have a dentist.
love, and the friendships in between.
Would you two just do it? I'm starving.
Reality Bites, rated PG-13, starts February 18th.
Yeah, so this is definitely a movie I feel like I would have connected with more at like 20
Yeah.
versus 30. Like I feel like maybe that's my big disconnect that I felt with
You're like
this
these
movie.
youngins.
Well, like the whole beginning of it is kind of like, there's a scene where her and Winona Ryder's character, Leilania, and Ethan Hawke's character, Troy, your leads in the movie, are at dinners with her parents um, after her graduation, where she was valedictorian and like getting offered a BMW as a car, and kind of like, did you not listen to the speech? We're not trying to take over this corporate world, like this whole thing, like we're gonna change the world. And like I guess that's where the moniker of like the title of the movie comes in. Reality Bites is when you actually start
Mm,
working, you start realizing like you can't be taking these things for granted.
mm,
The like people offering you nice things to help you out because life is harder than you may realize.
mm.
Um, and I feel like maybe that was the disconnect for me, is like I guess I've gotten to the point that I feel more, you know what I mean, where it's like
Yeah,
not just starting out.
yeah, you're like, oh come on, like fucking like why don't you just like grow up a little bit? One thing I realized on this rewatch, a movie this kind of reminded me of, but did so much better than that movie was the fault. Not the Fault in Our Stars. Fucking what was that movie the Person Being a Wallflower, the movie we covered on the pod, where like sometimes these movies can like go into just like a melodramatic bullshit where it's just like, oh, this person had
Yeah.
tragedy, this person had tragedy, this person had tragedy. But for some reason, this worked for me in this movie because I think the characters were much more likable and had
I,
fleshed out a little bit more than just their
I
stupid
kind of
tragedy or their
disagree with
tragedies.
you. I didn't really find Troy, like I felt bad about his dad who was dealing with prostate cancer, but everything about him was like douchebag to a T.
Well,
Um,
that's the thing. That's it's funny because this is a very 90s movie. This is like essentially a Gen X movie more than anything. And the main love triangle is essentially like, does Winona Ryder want to be with Ben Stiller? Like, the kind of like yuppie, kind of dorky guy, or
the guy
Ethan
who's
Hawke, who's like the
established,
brooding artist.
the guy who's yeah, the brooding artist, or like the corporate hotshot.
And in the 90s, people were like, oh, like, that's part. I mean, we'll jump into the end, but in the end of the movie, she ends up choosing like Ethan Hawke. And that was like, I feel like the 90s Gen X way of like, yeah, don't sell out. That's when people gave a shit about selling out so much. And nowadays, I
People,
personally feel like she chose the wrong guy. I feel like she should have chose Ben Stiller, as much as it pains my heart to say, because Ethan
like
Hawke's
he
not
could
just a
have,
jackass.
yeah, he just like he's just not like redeemable. Like I get that they
He's
were friends for a longer time, and maybe like that was one of the things, like is like it would just be like little like 30-second clips of them going back and forth, and then he would say something that pisses her off, and like they weren't friends for like a majority of the movie.
they had a falling out, and like I as much as I do like this movie overall, but like it was just the one thing that she should have. Yeah, Ben Stiller fucked up, like with his by mishandling her like
Yeah,
documentary, but it wasn't his fault intentionally. I feel like,
it wasn't his
and
fault intentionally, and like I don't know, like he got like her, she wants to be a documentary, a document. she wants to be a documentary filmmaker, and
Mhm.
she like has been filming her friends like and the struggles of the youth of today. And Ben Stiller works at like MTV, the
It was
you
the
know
MTV type.
we couldn't get the license for MTV, so it's this is the channel that we actually work at now.
And they
Uh,
actually say in the movie, this is the MT. The channel's kind of like MTV but edgier. Like,
yeah,
it's just such a '90s term right
not
there.
such a 90s term. And like I mean ultimately if you're an unknown documentary filmmaker that's like 23, you're you can submit the footage and they're going to cut it how they want it. Like he actually gave her the opportunity to have something made. Like
Mhm.
it was, and it like that's the other thing too. And it's part of that is I guess a charm and like the nativity of the characters is
Mhm.
like you wouldn't realize that like this was just the debut to like a bunch of like investors and stuff, and seeing if it's something that's going to air, like their response to it,
Mhm.
versus like it actually being the thing that debuted on television. You can't take it back,
Mhm.
because ultimately you need to like take that back.
It's a question of just like almost integrity. I mean, when this movie was made, this is the time of like a band like the punk band Jawbreaker went made to a major label, and people were like they lost fans because they were sellouts. How could you? Like people actually gave a shit about that. They're like, oh, really integrity about the art. Like you're not supposed to just make money. Whereas nowadays, I feel like the culture's kind of shifted where people are just like
Well,
just
I guess
just
like
make what you can get from your art. Like fuck it.
yeah, like the cost of living has just gone up so much compared
Yeah,
to the
that's probably what it
90s.
is.
Like it's you can't tell me that's not a big thing. Like um
Well,
you
yeah, like when you the inflation calculator came out in handy a lot in this movie because like sometimes it'd pop up like oh it'd be only this or 400 or something. Um and it also does like show like the way like sometimes the early 20s where you just gotta hustle and just do where the fuck you can, whereas her case was stealing money from her dad
yeah,
essentially.
using her dad's card money and like kind of said and she was working as a production assistant on some talk show, and like the guy was a dick, but and like didn't want her there full time, and then she sabotaged the show and got fired and then didn't have any income source anymore. And it's
Hmm.
one of those like something a mistake you would make at 22, 23 years old.
Yeah, like
um
oh fuck you, fuck the man. This is definitely just like a very early like 20s where you're like kind of punk mentality about some shit. What do you think about the whole setup of like her working at that morning show? Because I thought it was hilarious, especially John Maloney. It gave off such like clear '90s morning show vibes.
yeah, definitely did. I mean, you could see a little Mrs. Doubtfire in that, like just in like
Yeah.
the way that they showed the room that it was like the set that it was on and stuff, and
Yeah.
like the way the script and like the little skits that they would put into it, like you could definitely feel that. um
I love the fucking prank right there. It's just like just fuck this guy, make him read the cue cards. Very Anchorman-esque.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And because the interesting thing is it really focuses on Troy and Leilania, but they uh there's also Janine Garofalo who plays Vicky, and then Steve Zahn playing Sammy as like friends who are like kind of in the movie, and then like have like serious things that they have to overcome, and they almost feel like at 1994 what were big issues for young people to deal with. Like one was like
Yeah.
HIV and the other one was like coming out to your parents that are conservative, and
Mm.
that was like that was all they kind of offered. Like we didn't really spend too much time with them other than like the phone bill was
Well,
too high.
I was, especially if Steve's Zahn, I was looking of like, solo scenes or him scenes with like one on one of someone else. And really it was only just the little subplot of him coming out to his parents, which when I first watched it was very like striking and like kind of like hit, but and I felt it authentic in a way that movies like Purpose of Being a Wallflower did not in a way. Because I just think that in general that this movie focused on more on like the overall friendship vibe. I think the first like 30 to 40 minutes of this movie are just a fun hangout movie. And it did almost feel like on my first rewatch, you're like, oh shit, I'm seeing my friends again or something like that. And that's what I think I'd come back to more of this movie more than the melodramatic moments, which I feel like in the cases of just Janine Garofalo and Steve Zahn felt a little more superfluous or more just like let's just add up some melodrama right
Yeah,
here.
Well, one of the things I saw when they were developing the script is that like they spent more time with those characters, but ultimately felt like it was better to like trim them out and focus more on Troy and Leilania, and which I get from like a storytelling perspective, especially when your first 40 minutes of your movie is just kind of chilling.
Well,
Um,
also the movie runtime. I mean, I think this movie flows really well. Only
it
99
does.
minutes. We don't need at the end of the day, we don't need like very super fleshed out of every single front character.
No,
Um,
no, but like even in those hangout movies, they all kind of felt a little secondary,
mm.
like ultra secondary. Like for me, I didn't really get the chances. A little more with Janine Garofalo's character, but not so much with Steve Zahn's character. And I was like,
Yeah, Steve.
I love Steve Zahn, and I was like, oh, there's Steve Zahn, and then like I didn't, and then he was like in the movie for 5 minutes.
To be fair, this was his like second movie ever, apparently. So, in terms of like cast priority, you wish nowadays, but this came out a point for Ben Stiller. This is the first movie he ever directed. This is the second movie we've covered of his. Technically third if you count Meet the Parents, but you don't being Zoolander. Um, and apparently, like they wrote the script like back in the day in like '91, and the Ben Stiller show. Have you ever seen that, by the way?
No.
Very fun sketch show. Bob Odenkirk, Jeannie Garofalo, Andy Dick, and Ben Stiller. But anyways, he basically took over directing roles of that once that they saw Ben Stiller show. He should direct this movie, and this one did turn around. No one really wanted to get it because singles kind of bombed the box office, and people are like, "Oh, Gen X like bullshit movies aren't going to draw." And it wasn't until Winona Ryder read the script and she wanted to do it, and immediately Universal Pictures was like, "Let's do this." Because at the time for Winona Ryder, this is like her being in a lot of period pieces, like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, movies like that, where she just pretty much said, I want to wear just some blue jeans. And this felt like what I would have been like if I didn't become a movie star. And I think this is a good role for her in general. I think that Jenny captures her cool vibe. How do you feel about her performance overall in this?
I thought she was fine. I kind of feel like now that we've seen a good amount of Winona Ryder movies on this podcast,
Yeah, if
I'm
there's
letting
anything we've covered.
I got to take over some influence charge on this podcast here. But
Hey, you get your ones in, you get your Heats, you get your Scarface, which is coming up in Tombstone. You're getting your picks in.
but with this movie, she's not that she's a good actress, but like I didn't really see a difference between her here and then her and like Heathers. Like I kind of got
Heathers.
the Heathers. I got the same vibe. I listen. I've been talking for 5 hours today. You gotta, the old brain is not functioning at 100% here when we're recording after work.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, that Andy Dick cameo was surprising. I've never seen a guy that they've wanted to be a bigger like not star, but like C-list level guy that's just gonna kind of show up for a bit role and everything. Like I feel like that was like what
That was
everybody in Hollywood want from him, and he
that
was
was a
just
great montage too of just like him, Keith David from The Thing, showing up in there too randomly.
yeah.
Just like random, just like
Yeah,
heaters,
that
just
was
one
one of
seater.
those. That was for me. It was like, oh, it's the
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. When I
When
first
Keith
watched this,
David
I saw
show.
Keith David on the
Keith,
screen. I was like, oh, what the fuck? He's in this movie.
yeah,
Let's go.
but then then you just think of like Andy Dick, and you find out all the things that he did, and you're like, oh, yeah, I guess it
I
explains why he was like a shimmering star in the '90s, and now he just kind of like shows up on like VH1's like I Love the '80s kind of
Well,
shit.
yeah, he was essentially like one of the main members of the Ben Stiller show, which was like a sketch show that lasted for one season, produced by Judd Apatow, and that's definitely why he had this little one scene cameo, and especially why Gene Garofalo was in this movie too. But Andy Dick in general, I mean, there's like pretty much stories out there in Hollywood that everyone has like a shitty Andy Dick story of just like, oh, I saw him at a bar, start harassing me or something, and
He
just
just
like
wanted to grab my dick,
he
and I've known him for 30 seconds, and it's
the
like,
dude took
oh,
his last name to heart. He's like, "Oh, Andy Dick, I'm gonna be a fucking dick." But anyway,
yeah, he's an interesting character if you don't know
yeah.
anything else. I've
But
not,
speaking of dicks, how'd you feel Ethan Hawke in general in this movie?
I
He's
thought
a
he was
great guy in real life.
I thought it was a great performance. Like I thought he
Yeah.
did a really good job.
Mhm.
And I said I really liked the ending. Basically after Ben Stiller like the debut of the documentary bombs, she like
Mhm.
runs back to the apartment Troy is there and they hook up, and then he runs away in the morning, and then like they have a confrontation at his show later where he
Hmm.
like tells her the truth. He's like, listen, I love you. I got scared. Okay, I've never been with somebody that I loved before, and she wasn't responsive of it. As Mickey shows up with like 2 tickets to New York, first
Yeah.
class tickets to New York to go and repitch the documentary any way that he
Yeah.
could, which definitely puts her in like a more awkward position there.
Hmm.
And then like he kind of runs away, and we don't really know why, but we see him going to Chicago, and then we see him in a hospital, like kind of shaking, which I thought was great when he calls her, and then can't even speak on the phone, just hangs up, and then she's gonna run to Chicago to try to find him, and he's at the door. Like I thought that was the best performance in the whole movie, was that
I
for
think the way that Ethan Hawke performed, just like coldness too, of the scene where like right after they made out briefly and she was like, no, I can't do this. And then she goes to the diner and just expects them to be like buddy buddy, like hang out, like
yeah.
oh patter patter. And he's just like, hey, what's up? I gotta go. I
Yeah,
gotta
I
leave.
guess, and part of it is his failure to like communicate, being like, no, like I really care about you, and I really don't want to be with anybody else.
Which I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's why. I mean, do you think that she should have chosen him or Ben Stiller? No,
I
ultimately.
mean, in the long run, are they going to work out? He was in a suit at the end, so maybe he wants to get a real job. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe this is the start of him just becoming like oh and on and on.
Yeah, I think part of it is like the delusion of your like that early part of your 20s where like you haven't had any real responsibilities yet,
Hmm.
and then like those bills and stuff slow, and like acting like poorly at work will get you fired, and then you don't have money coming in.
Well, it's also like the like kind of like ego thing that people go through sometimes when they like get fired. Like I'm not gonna work at the fucking Gap. I'm just like how
Yeah.
pretentious Renault's writer character is. She's definitely the type that just like is learning on her feet.
Well,
Like,
because her dad like owns a company, like she comes from money, even though she's
mm,
trying to like pretend that's not a side of her, but it is. Like her graduation gift was an unlimited gas card for a year, which
yeah,
she uses to basically
eat
um,
food, yeah, like
eat
fucking do
food
everything.
and buy, like when they were in the hole of money, like she would buy people gas and be like, okay, how much gas are you putting in? Okay, I'll fill you up if you give me the $20 cash right now. Which, tip of the cap, I get it. There on that, which I thought that was a funny montage. But yeah, I
Yeah.
thought the ending was really poignant and powerful. There, but like I guess ultimately it was like that moment isolated was good. I just didn't really feel the connection between these two characters throughout the entire movie. Um, I
Well, yeah,
felt
I felt that she had a better connection with Ben Stiller.
yeah, I did too, and I felt like she naively just like ran away from him and into like a familiar arms, like a longtime friend, and then
it
just it almost put her in a position that she's tanking her documentary, like her dream of being a filmmaker, like kind of.
to be with like Ethan Hawke who does nothing essentially.
Yeah.
I mean that's essentially just the full 90s of it. I think a good litmus test for this movie, if you would like it or not, is just first asking, how do you feel about the documentary? Do you think that like this movie hyped it up as like this is some great work? Like what do you think? Whereas Roger Ebert saw this movie and he was like, this sucked. Like the movie
the
she's making sounds awful.
the movie she's making the movie she's making sounds awful, but like you need I say this because like there's no real mention of like an overarching theme that
Mm,
like like if you're gonna tie like four disparate stories together just because they're friends,
mm.
um, and just call it like, oh, this is our generation's experience of life right now, like that's not enough. Like you need like something to kind of tie them together.
Yeah.
And it's just missing that.
Do you think that as a whole is the movie or
No, I I'm I feel like this movie is something I would have connected with more at a younger age, but for me, I just like struggled to kind of get into it during the hangout phase that you kind of adored, and actually kind of enjoyed more of the melodramatic moments than anything else. Like,
That's interesting because this reminds me of like, 4 years ago of like me living with my buddies where like, my living with one of my best friends and one of our best friends lived directly above us. We'd always just hang out in the townhouse, always see each other. That's what the first 30 minutes felt like, just over and over again. It's like, oh shit. I think the soundtrack is great. I mean, like, did you stick around for the Lisa Loeb song at the end?
no, I had it off like the second credits hit.
So you didn't even see the post credits scene or post credits?
Don't tell me they did a Marvel thing too. Oh my god.
No, yeah, just welcome Winona Ryder to the Goth universe or some bullshit. No, it was essentially like, at the end of the movie, it shows that Ben Stiller's character created like a Melrose Place like TV drama that's essentially just like Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke's characters, where it's just like he took inspiration from that and being like, I'm a musician, I have to make my art, and she was like, but you can't go anywhere.
Yeah,
It's a
I
good
mean,
little.
listen, this was kind of like any post-credits stuff. I'm like the only good one that's ever been done was the Ferris Bueller one, where it's like you're still here. The movie's over. What are you doing here? Like I love that. It's like, why are you sitting through this? I remember when we reviewed Doctor Strange and something else. I think we did Army of Darkness, Doctor Strange together.
Yeah.
Way back when the Doctor Strange 2. And then you were like, did you see the post-credit scene and then the post-credit scene? I was like, no, buddy, I was out of there the second that like I don't have any interest in watching
Yeah.
post-credit. I like at all. Like, put it in your movie. And then like we saw the anyone but you version we saw was like the Valentine's Day re-release or whatever. And then like, you have Sydney Sweeney and Glenn Powell like speaking to you, being like, after the credits roll, we have another surprise for you. And one of the big themes of that movie was like the song "Unwritten" by Natasha Bedingfield.
Yeah.
And like teased at the beginning and then like played redundantly at the last like 15-20 minutes of the movie. And then the credits roll with like the actors and stuff, and they do like a little blooper reel to "Unwritten." Cute. Okay, fine. And then sit through the credits, which thankfully were short because there's not a lot of like visual effects artists and like, all that stuff that's like on a Marvel movie. Like those credits are 30 minutes long.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, here's this. And then it was just another cut of the music video for "Unwritten" by Anyone But You with like the actors and stuff like performing it. And I was just like, wow, so they just literally like anytime they called cut and like, that's a good take. Okay, now we just need you to do "Unwritten" real quick. And they just like did it at every
That's a
location in the
DVD.
movie.
That's a DVD extra.
That's a
right
DVD.
there.
That's a DVD nonsense
Extra.
that
Yeah.
I did not need to sit through to
Well,
watch.
it is one of those things that's like I started collecting like more like 4Ks and Blu-rays and stuff like that, and I've been scouring through like fucking special features. That's the stupid bullshit they had. Like with Best Video, I was able to rent She's All That, and She's All That had like a music. The only special feature was a music video for that song "Kiss Me" of just like Freddie Prinze Jr. and Rachel Lee Cook in this like music video. Just like, oh my god, look at that. So I mean, that's the thing we probably see. Like if we got Anyone But You on Blu-ray, that's definitely a special feature right there. Just some stupid bullshit like that.
Yeah, I mean that's what it felt like, and it felt like, well, we need to give people a reason to come in, but it's like it's very tough when it's a song that I have now heard like 3 times in almost completion, like the past like 15 minutes. Like it's like I love that song, like I can listen to it on repeat, but it's tough to get me to sit in a theater.
Oh, it's
and give
also
me
like a fucking
promise.
like it's a song that I feel like if I looked up right now, it's probably in so many other fucking movies.
Oh,
Don't
yeah,
get me wrong.
yeah.
I love it, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that's the ultimate like putting a romantic comedy song. Let's be honest.
Yeah. So
I am a star. I'm a star, I'm a star, I'm a star. I am a big, bright, shining star.
All right, Tommy, who is the star of Reality Bites? Who do you feel gave the best performance?
I think that Ethan Hawke was really great in this movie, but I think Winona Ryder just gave off like a very relatable, just person getting on their feet in early 20s role. I think she was really charming in this movie, and I thought it was fun.
I see. I think it was for me it was Ethan Hawke because I love Ethan Hawke and I hated him in this, which is like that's
What you're supposed to.
That's great. Yeah, I know you're supposed to, and I'm saying that's a great acting. Right there. I felt like he carried what emotion was really in this movie because like Janine Garofalo, she had an AIDS scare, and then it was just like, I am AIDS free, and then that was that.
Yeah, it just fucking.
And then
eats it up.
Steve Zahn was like, I'm gay, and he came out to his parents, and then it's
Hey,
like, this is my boyfriend. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like he was the only one that had like an
Here's one thing I'll say though. Here's
any
one thing.
emotional weight or like actually
Yeah.
having reality bite him in the ass because he lost his dad. Like he's
Here's
not going to
what's
be able to talk to his dad again.
yeah. I mean, here's one thing I'll say. I mean, like the thing that elevates this movie over like again, I just have to mention Person Beauty Wildfire because I'm really movie being fucking terrible. Is at least those melodramatic moments of like the superfluous characters don't take it that much runtime.
Yeah, well, the perks of being a
Yeah.
wallflower, from what I can remember,
Exactly. This is we're talking about movies saw 2 years ago.
What I can remember.
Neither of us have rewatched. I have no desire to.
I'm never watching that movie again.
Yeah, no.
Like all of the drama of it was very like so teenage angsty. Like, and granted,
Yeah.
it was high school versus like just graduated college, so like they're going to be confronted with like real issues, and like all of those issues are real issues. You're saying like the AIDS and the other one are not superfluous. I think they might be. I wasn't. I was 1 years old in 1994. I don't know if it was like something like didn't Philadelphia win Best Picture in 1994?
That was like 90
93, 94. It was on the.
It was a 93 movie. Yeah.
So it won it in 1994.
So a year before. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just saying it's much better than The Perks of Being a Wallflower, but I think that was like quite literally the only movie both you and I were like, ugh, gross.
Why do we cover this?
Yeah, we were pretty scathing on that one. But yeah, for me, Ethan Hawke, Ben Stiller playing a straight man again, not surprising. Keith David cameos, just always nice to see. And more Steve Zahn in your movies. Like that's my notes to Hollywood.
Ah, are you ready, comedy partner? Waka waka.
All right, Tommy, would Reality Bites, the movie that has AIDS and coming out to your parents, work as a Muppet adaptation?
Well, ultimately no, but I would just love to see just a chill Muppet hangout movie. We got that with the Muppet TV show.
Yeah, just
from
adapt
2015.
just adapt Dazed and Confused into
Yeah,
a Muppet
exactly.
adaptation. Like because you say like good hangout movie. Like I didn't really get a good hangout movie vibe from this. Like I think of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That's a great hangout movie. Dazed and Confused is the greatest hangout movie ever made. There will never be a movie that can ever even come close to that in terms of hanging out.
Yeah, I got to see it recently, and like, yeah, it's always like visiting your best friends. It's like, fuck, I can't. Let's go. We're gonna go to the water tower.
I just didn't like connect with it like that. Because like,
but I think that in the movie, if you're gonna do that, I think you keep Winona Ryder as a Muppet. I feel like she could, or as a human, I feel like she could add up well. Ethan Hawke would be probably.
No, he should stay. No, he should stay as a. No, they should just change the movie altogether. And then like Reality Bites is when like douchebag Troy is the only human in the world, and he just like smokes a bunch of weed and takes his guitar and starts like violently thrashing at puppets. Like you just make this into a horror movie. That's my transition because Troy has no love for the Muppets. I can feel that in my heart and soul.
Yeah. Oh, he's totally pretentious about it. I mean, he only likes good times.
He only likes good times. All right, Tommy, review time of your Tommy Core movie. Give me a score out of 5.
Yeah, so I think that overall this is a fun movie. I mean, I think that the first 30 minutes should capture a fun, like a little good, like hangout vibe, right there. I think that overall some of the melodramatic stuff kind of bogs it down, but thankfully they don't take up like that much of the runtime. And I think Winona Ryder's great throughout this, and Ethan Hawke is phenomenal. I'm gonna go, I think 4 out of 5. So
okay,
yeah.
I'm gonna go 2 out of 5. I didn't really care for the first. Like I enjoyed the melodramatic stuff between Troy and Leilani more than you did. And I like the scene of the triangle with Ben Stiller showing up and like how that all played out. It felt very realistic of like somebody who's not in control of their emotions right now making a bad decision that's gonna marker on both people. I didn't get the hangout vibe the first 90, the first 40 minutes or whatever. Some humorous moments in it. Like it's not a bad move. It's not bad. It wasn't my cup of tea. Could have also been like a mood thing. Like I wonder if I watched this in like a better, more relaxed mood, I would have enjoyed it more. But for me, two out of five.
Yeah.
That's
To
how
be fair, watching a melodramatic movie while you're like at work, being like, "Oh, you're bitching about this," like, come on.
Yeah, well, wasn't at work. It was at my apartment, whereas my office also is. But I was also finishing some stuff up while I had it on at the beginning because that's duty calls. Got to
Yeah.
pay the bills somehow, and it's not this podcast that's paying the bills. That's for sure. So, Tommy, any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
Well, thank you guys so much for listening. This is our 99th episode. So next episode is episode 100. We're gonna be taking off next week, but episode 100 is gonna kick off March, and we're gonna be doing Tombstone. Get ready. It's gonna be fucking awesome. I've never seen it. I saw parts of it, but I think I fell asleep because I was very drunk in a friend's basement, as I tend to do. But anyways, follow us on social media at See It Pod. That's on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the occasional thread. I did post on there to me last week, so still somewhat active.
I feel like you did that solely so you can still say threads.
Yes,
in this.
that's
Like,
exactly why. And we have a YouTube account. I post our episodes on YouTube. Check that out. It's mostly just audio.
You would be better off posting on MySpace than on Threads. I just want you to know that.
Is MySpace even a thing, or Yik Yak, or I know Snapchat's still a thing, but I'm not on Snapchat, and I don't know how we can upload podcasts to Snapchat. But anyways, leave us a 5-star review. Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Really helps us out, helps us grow the show. And yeah, get ready. Episode 100, Tombstone. Can't wait. Always looked like a fucking sick movie I should have seen years ago.
Thank you all so much for listening. We'll see you next week.